Thomas Aquinas lived during the Middle Ages, a time when the line between philosophy and theology was practically non-existent. Back then, nearly all philosophers were theologians or clerics, and most intellectual pursuits were dedicated to understanding the divine. Philosophy was theology, and theology was philosophy. In this era, Aquinas stood out, not only for his brilliance, but for how he dared to marry faith and reason in ways that were revolutionary. One of Aquinas' greatest contributions is his work Summa Theologica, or the Summary of Theology. It's an expansive, structured guide intended as an introduction to Christian theology. But don't let the word introduction fool you. Summa Theologica tackles some of the most complex and fundamental questions about God, existence, ethics, and human nature. Aquinas wrote it for beginners in theology, but he made sure it was also comprehensive enough to challenge the best minds of his day. The structure of Summa Theologica is quite approachable and follows a classical pattern. Each topic is introduced with a question, followed by arguments and objections. Aquinas then systematically addresses the objections one by one. This question and answer format makes Summa surprisingly accessible, guiding readers through each argument and its counterpoints. It's one reason why Aquinas' work has remained influential and relatively easy to read compared to other dense philosophical works. So who influenced Aquinas' thinking? Though he was firmly a Christian thinker, Aquinas was also deeply inspired by pagan philosophers, especially Aristotle. He drew upon Greek and Islamic thought as well, including the works of Muslim scholars like Averroes. This open-minded approach, the reliance on non-Christian sources, actually led to criticism. Some of his contemporaries in the church felt he was straying too far from Christian doctrine. Yet Aquinas believed that reason was universal and that truth, no matter its source, could only deepen understanding of God. His view was revolutionary, bridging the gap between Christian teachings and ancient philosophy, creating a synthesis that's still studied today. But for Aquinas, was philosophy enough? Not quite. While he held reason and logic in high regard, he didn't believe philosophy alone can answer life's biggest questions. Aquinas argued that while human reason can lead us close to God, there are mysteries, like the Trinity and the Incarnation, that philosophy alone can't explain. For these, we need faith. In Summa, he calls philosophy the handmaiden of theology, meant to serve faith but not replace it. And in his quest to prove God's existence, Aquinas famously introduced his 5 ways, or 5 proofs. These are 5 logical arguments that demonstrate God's existence, grounded in observation and reason. The first is the argument from motion. Aquinas observed that things in the world are constantly changing or moving. Leaves falling, stars shifting in the sky, and so on. He reasoned that everything in motion was put into motion by something else. But if you trace this back, there must be a first mover that sets everything in motion without itself being moved. Aquinas identified this unmoved mover as God. The second proof is the argument from causation, also known as the first cause argument. Everything in the universe is the effect of a cause, like a domino effect. Each cause is itself the effect of a prior cause. But Aquinas argued that if you go far enough back, there must be an original cause that itself wasn't caused by anything else. This, he concluded, is God. The third proof is based on contingency. Aquinas pointed out that things in the world exist and then cease to exist. They are born, they grow, and they die. But if everything were like this, if everything were contingent, then logically there must have been a time when nothing existed. Yet, something does exist. So there must be something that has always existed, something necessary and eternal, and that something, he argued, is God. The fourth proof is the argument from gradation. Aquinas noticed that we rank things in terms of qualities like goodness, truth, beauty, and so on. For example, we could compare kindness and see some acts as more kind as others. Aquinas argued that these gradations suggest an ultimate standard, a source of perfection against which all other things are measured. This ultimate standard, he said, is God. And the fifth proof is the argument from design. Aquinas observed the order and purpose in nature, the complex structure of plants, the movements of planets, and the design of animals. These things seem to act towards some purpose, even though they themselves lack awareness. Aquinas concluded that this order and purposeful design must come from an intelligent designer, which he identified as God. These 5 proofs, taken together, form Aquinas' rational foundation for belief in God. To him, belief in God wasn't just a leap of faith, but could be logically supported through observation and reason. However, Aquinas didn't avoid the big, troubling questions. One of the toughest, the problem of evil. If God is all-powerful and all-good, why does evil exist? Aquinas offered an explanation. He argued that evil is not an entity or a thing in itself, but rather the absence or lack of good. Think of it like darkness, which is the absence of light. In this view, God allows evil because it brings about a greater good, a way for virtues like courage, forgiveness, and resilience to exist. Evil, to Aquinas, is not a contradiction to God's goodness, but rather a consequence of a world where free will and moral growth are possible. Finally, Aquinas' thoughts on grace reveal his understanding of the relationship between God and humanity. Grace, for Aquinas, is an unearned, divine gift that elevates humanity beyond what we could achieve on our own. While we can know some truths about God through reason, it is only through grace that we can be transformed. In his view, grace perfects nature. It allows us to do things we could never do on our own, like reach a closeness to God that surpasses any human capability. Grace, then, is what allows us to go beyond reason and enter into a deeper, personal connection with the divine. In Aquinas' view, reason and faith are partners, not rivals. His Summa Theologica invites readers to explore both the mysteries of faith and the logic of philosophy, showing that the journey towards understanding God is both rational and spiritual. Through his writing, Aquinas demonstrates that the pursuit of truth can be one that uses all the tools available to humanity: reason, faith, logic, and grace, to bring us closer to the divine.